My sister humiliated me for years for going to community college and blocked me. Now that I'm a successful writer, she came back begging. But I discovered she created a fraudulent business with my name and scammed thousands of dollars. What I did left them all speechless. I'm 24 years old. I work as a self-published writer, and I haven't spoken to my older sister, Penelope, for 3 years. The thing is, for a long time I thought maybe I was the dramatic one. You know, the one who was exaggerating everything. But after what happened a few months ago, I realized that cutting contact with her was probably the best thing I could have done for my mental health. I guess I should start at the beginning, when we were kids and everything was different, because trust me, it wasn't always like this. Penelope and I were super close when we were girls. She's 2 years older than me, and when we were little, we literally did everything together. We shared a room, we shared clothes. Well, I wore hers when it was too big on me, basically. And we always played at being writers or teachers or whatever. She was my best friend. Seriously. I never thought things would end up the way they did, but looking back, I think the signs were there from the moment she started college. When Penelope was like 18 years old, she got into a super prestigious university, one of those that costs a fortune and has old buildings with ivy on the walls and all that fancy stuff. My parents were so proud, obviously, and so was she. She started changing almost immediately, like she started talking differently, dressing differently, hanging out with people who clearly came from families with a lot more money than ours. It didn't bother me at first. I mean, I thought it was normal for college to change you a bit. Right? But then it was my turn. I decided to go to community college. Not because I couldn't get in anywhere else. The truth is, my grades were good. But I didn't want to go into debt for the next 20 years of my life for a piece of paper that said the name of a fancy university. I wanted to study writing. I wanted to learn. But I also wanted to be practical. My parents understood, I think. Although I noticed my mom, Helen, was a bit disappointed. But the one who really didn't understand was Penelope. At first it was just small comments, like subtle. She'd ask me things like, "And how's your little school?" Or say things like, "Oh, that's cool that you don't care as much about prestige as I do." I tried to ignore it because, well, she's my sister, and I thought it would eventually pass. But it didn't pass. In fact, it got worse. She started avoiding mentioning where I was studying when she talked to her friends from university. If anyone asked, she'd just say, "Oh, my sister is also studying," and change the subject super quickly. What really hurt me was when she started not inviting me to things. She'd throw parties at her apartment. She shared an apartment near campus with 2 roommates, and I'd see the photos on social media afterward. When I'd ask her why she hadn't invited me, she always had excuses, that it was something small, that she thought I'd be busy, that my friends wouldn't fit in with hers. Basically, she was telling me she was embarrassed of me, but without saying it directly. You know what I mean? It went on like that for about 2 years. I finished my associate degree at community college and even got some small publications of my short stories in online literary magazines. I was proud of myself, honestly, but every time I tried to share my accomplishments with Penelope, she barely reacted. It was like nothing I did mattered, because it didn't come with the seal of approval from a prestigious university. And then the party thing happened. 3 years ago, when I was 21 and she was 23, Penelope threw a party at my parents' house. It was something like a reunion of alumni from her university or something like that. I don't remember exactly. I was there because, well, I still lived there. I was saving money while starting my writing career. The thing is, I accidentally spilled a drink on one of her friend's dresses. It was a total accident. Like I tripped over something and the glass went flying. I apologized, like 1,000 times, offered to pay for dry cleaning, everything, but Penelope exploded. In front of all her fancy friends, she yelled at me that I was pathetic, that I was always ruining everything, that she couldn't take me anywhere without me making a fool of myself. She said, and I remember this perfectly because the words stayed engraved in my mind. She said, "This is exactly why I don't invite you to anything. You're an embarrassment." I stood there, feeling my eyes fill with tears in front of all those people who were looking at me with a mixture of pity and judgment, and all I could do was go to my room. After that night, Penelope never spoke to me again. Literally. She blocked me from everywhere. WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, everything. When I tried to talk to her in person at my parents' house, she completely ignored me or left the room. I tried to apologize. I wrote her letters. Yes, paper letters because I had no other way to contact her. I sent her messages through my dado. Mom, nothing. Total silence. My mom, Helen, always told me to give her time, that Penelope would eventually calm down. But months went by, and nothing changed. What hurt me most was that my mom clearly had more patience with Penelope than with me. It was always me who had to make the effort. Me who had to apologize more. Me who had to understand that my sister was under a lot of stress with university, and then with finding a job. As if I didn't have my own stress. You know? During those 3 years, I made my life. I moved to my own apartment. Super small. But mine. I started self-publishing my books on Amazon. And honestly, I did pretty well. I didn't become a millionaire or anything, but my books started selling. I got a loyal reader base, and I even managed to get one of my books to be a bestseller in its category for a few weeks. I was proud of what I'd built without anyone's help. Without a fancy university degree, just with hard work and dedication. But my mom never stopped, pressuring me to fix things with Penelope. Every time we talked, the topic came up. That Penelope was my only sister. That family was the most important thing. That I was going to regret not having a relationship with her when we were older. Honestly, it had me exhausted. But it also made me feel guilty, because part of me missed my sister, or at least I missed the sister she used to be before all this happened. About 6 months ago, my mom convinced me to go to Penelope's 26th birthday. She told me that Penelope had given her approval for me to go, which should have been a red flag, but I was still naive. She made me buy a super expensive gift, a designer bag that cost me like $800, because according to my mom, that would show I was making a real effort to reconcile. Basically, I spent almost everything I'd earned that month on that damn bag. I arrived at the party with the bag wrapped in expensive paper and a ridiculously big bow, feeling hopeful for the first time in years. I thought that maybe, just maybe, we could start over. How foolish I was. Seriously. The party was at a semi-elegant restaurant. There were like 30 people there, all Penelope's friends from her university and her job. I didn't know anyone. When I arrived, Penelope saw me and her face showed nothing. Not happiness, not anger, just like indifference. I approached, gave her the bag, told her happy birthday. She opened it in front of everyone, looked at the designer bag, and what she said next still hurts me. She said, "Wow, Zoe, where'd you get the money for this? Did you finally get a real job, or are you still playing at being a writer?" And everyone laughed. Everyone. They laughed at me like I was the joke of the night. I felt the floor open up beneath me. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to run, but I was paralyzed. I tried to laugh too. You know, like to save the situation, but my voice came out all weird and broken. Penelope continued, saying things like, "No offense, little sis, but I think we all know that going to community college wasn't exactly the best decision, right? Calling me community college trash in front of all those people. I don't know how I managed to keep my composure, but somehow I did. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, one of her friends, Laura, I think her name was, looked at me more closely and said, "Wait, are you Z. M. Cooper?" Turns out she'd read one of my books and loved it. She started talking about how my last novel had made her cry and how she'd been waiting for the sequel. Other people at the table started taking out their phones, searching my name, looking at my books on Amazon. Looking at the reviews, he had like thousands of reviews at that point, most of them 5 stars. Penelope's face changed so fast it was almost comical. Suddenly she was all smiles and pride, saying things like, "Yeah, my little sister is amazing. I always knew she was going to be successful. I'm super proud of her." It was nauseating. I literally felt like throwing up. All those people who had laughed at me 5 minutes ago now wanted to take pictures with me, asked me to sign things, asked me about my books. I left that party feeling a mix of things. On one hand, it was satisfying that they saw I had achieved something real. On the other hand, I felt used and manipulated, because I knew Penelope's interest wasn't genuine. She only cared now because I had something that made her look good. And I was right. The next day, the calls and messages started. Penelope had unblocked me from everywhere and was bombarding me with texts saying things like, I missed you so much. We need to catch up. I'm sorry we drifted apart. Not a single real apology for what she'd done, not an acknowledgement of how she'd treated me for years. Just this sudden need to reconnect now that I was successful. I sent her a long but polite message saying I needed time, that I didn't feel comfortable reconnecting that quickly after 3 years of silence, especially considering her change of attitude seemed to be directly related to my success as a writer. I told her that if she really wanted to rebuild our relationship, we needed to have honest conversations about everything that had happened. Her response was basically more manipulation. She said I was being dramatic, that she'd always been proud of me, really? That life was too short to hold grudges. Not once did she admit she'd treated me badly. Not once did she sincerely apologize. I decided not to respond anymore and give myself space to think. But Penelope didn't accept that. A week later, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. I don't know how she got my address. Probably my mom gave it to her. But there she was, knocking on my door on a Saturday morning. I opened it because I thought it was my food delivery, and boom, there she was with coffee and donuts as if we were best friends. I let her in because, honestly, I didn't know what else to do. And also because a silly part of me still wanted to believe that maybe she'd changed. We sat in my living room, which is basically my living, dining, everything, room because the apartment is a studio, and she started asking super invasive questions about how much money I made from my books, how many books I sold per month, if I had a literary agent, if I'd thought about making movies or series from my stories. We didn't talk about anything real. We didn't talk about our feelings, about what had happened, about how we'd hurt each other. Well, mainly about how she'd hurt me. She just wanted information about my career and my money. And then, and this is what made me realize her true intentions, she said we should start a business together. Something related to my books, like a writing consulting company or a small publishing house or something. She said she had the contacts and the know-how from the corporate world, and I had the creative talent, and that together we'd be unstoppable. I told her I'd think about it. But inside, I already knew the answer was no. After she left, I sat on my couch feeling empty. Not sad exactly, just empty. Like, I'd finally accepted that the sister I remembered and missed no longer existed, and maybe never really existed in the way I thought. I didn't respond to her messages again after that visit. I thought she'd eventually get the message, but oh, I was so wrong. Turns out Penelope started telling people we were starting a business together. Without my knowledge, without my consent, without anything. I started getting messages from people I didn't even know congratulating me on the new company, asking for details, offering to invest money. At first I thought it was a misunderstanding. But then I talked to a cousin who had seen a post from Penelope on Facebook. He didn't have her added at that point. But my cousin did, where she'd announced our exciting new business project and was asking for investments and interest from potential clients. She even had a logo, made and everything, with both our names. I got furious. I sent her a very direct text message saying we hadn't agreed to any business, that she didn't have my permission to use my name or my work that way, and that she needed to retract immediately and tell everyone it had been a mistake. Her response was all defensive, saying she was only trying to help us both, that I was wasting my potential working alone, that we were family and families support each other. She made me feel like I was the bad guy for being upset. But what really pushed me over the edge was when I found out she'd started collecting money from investors. Yes, real money. People had given her deposits for this company that didn't exist, based on my name and my reputation as a writer. When I confronted Penelope about this, she acted like it was no big deal, like it was normal to take money from people for a business that hadn't even been agreed upon by both parties. I sent her one last message saying that if she didn't return the money to those people immediately, I was going to take legal action. I also told her I was sick of her manipulation, of how she only cared when I could be useful to her, and that she needed to stop contacting me. Then I blocked her from everywhere. Again. But this time without any doubt that I was doing the right thing. My mom called me like 2 days later, hysterical. Apparently, Penelope had told her version of the story, where I was the cruel sister who had refused to help my sister in trouble and had ruined her business plans. My mom was begging me to reconsider, to give Penelope a chance, that she was going through a difficult time financially, and that was my problem. How? I told my mom she needed to understand that Penelope had treated me like trash for years, had publicly humiliated me multiple times, and was now trying to use my name and my work for her own benefit without my consent. I told her that if she kept pressuring me to maintain a relationship with someone who clearly only saw me as a source of status and money, I was going to have to start limiting my contact with her too. That shut her up for a while. But like 2 weeks ago, she called me again saying Penelope was in serious financial trouble. Turns out she hadn't only taken money from investors for the fake business, but had spent it all on her lifestyle. Like expensive clothes, trips, dinners at fancy restaurants, trying to maintain this image of success she clearly couldn't sustain. Now people wanted their money back and she didn't have it. And my mom wanted me to help her. She wanted me to give Penelope money so she could return what she'd taken. I told her absolutely not, that Penelope had created this problem alone and needed to solve it alone. My mom told me I was cruel. How could I let my sister suffer like that? What would people think of our family? I responded with something I'd been wanting to say for years, that I was tired of being asked to sacrifice my mental peace and well-being for the sake of maintaining a happy family facade. That Penelope had had multiple opportunities to be a decent sister and had chosen to be horrible every time. That I didn't owe her anything just because we shared blood, and that if she couldn't see how toxic all this was, then maybe we needed to take a break too. My mom cried, told me I was hurting her, that I was destroying the family. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. Well, maybe a little bit, but mostly I felt relief. Like I'd finally taken off a huge weight from my shoulders. I don't know what's going to happen now with Penelope and her financial situation. Honestly, I don't care much. I know that probably sounds harsh, but after years of being treated like I was worth nothing, unless I could offer her something, after being humiliated and discarded and then pursued only when I became useful, I simply don't have any more empathy to give her. I keep writing, my books keep selling, and I'm working on a new series that I'm really excited to share with my readers. I have friends who value me for who I am, not for what I can do for them. I have a life I built from scratch without anyone's help, and I'm proud of that. Sometimes I still think about how we used to be as kids, when we shared secrets and dreams and everything seemed possible. But that Penelope no longer exists. If she ever existed outside my childhood imagination, the real Penelope turned out to be someone who can only love conditionally, only when there's something to gain. And I deserve more than that. We all deserve more than that. I don't know if I'll ever have a relationship with my sister again. Part of me hopes she'll eventually do the internal work necessary to become a better person, but I'm not going to hold my breath waiting. And I'm definitely not going to sacrifice my mental peace in the process. I've learned, the hardest way possible, that sometimes the best way to love someone is, from afar, with firm boundaries and without guilt. And that's okay.